The billionaire alpha who learned to kneel. Chapter 1. The rain poured heavily across the glass windows of the penthouse office. At the center of the room stood Caspian Vale. Tall, cold, untouchable. The kind of alpha people lowered their eyes to instinctively. The city worshipped him. At 29, he owned one of the largest investment companies in the country. Hotels, tech firms, real estate, shipping. There was almost nothing the name Caspian Vale did not touch. People called him ruthless. They were correct. He had built his empire by crushing competitors without mercy. Boardrooms feared him. Employees respected him from a distance. Investors followed him like starving wolves chasing meat. And despite all of it, his eyes were empty. "Sir, your spouse has arrived." Caspian did not look up from the documents on his desk. "Send him in." The assistant hesitated. Everyone knew the strange relationship between Caspian Vale and his Omega husband. A marriage without affection. A marriage without warmth. A marriage that existed only on paper. The door opened quietly. Claude Laurent stepped inside. Unlike Caspian, Claude carried warmth naturally. He was beautiful in a quiet way. Soft brown hair, intelligent amber eyes, and an elegance that no expensive suit could imitate. He wore a simple cream sweater beneath a dark coat, droplets of rain clinging to the fabric. Caspian finally looked up. For a second, something unreadable crossed his face. Then it vanished. "You're late," Caspian said. Claude smiled faintly. "Good evening to you too." No response. Claude had gotten used to that. 3 years. 3 years of marriage, and Caspian still treated him like a distant business partner. No affection. No acknowledgement. No claiming scent. Nothing. Most people did not even know Caspian Vale was married. Claude walked toward the desk and placed down a folder. "The projections for the Singapore branch. I revised the numbers." Caspian opened it immediately. His sharp eyes scanned every page. Silence filled the office. Claude watched him quietly. Sometimes he wondered why he still loved this man. Maybe because beneath the ice, there were tiny moments. Small things. Caspian remembering Claude disliked overly sweet coffee. Caspian standing slightly closer whenever aggressive alphas entered a room. Caspian sending bodyguards without saying a word. Tiny things. Not enough. Never enough. "You corrected the acquisition risks," Caspian finally said. "Yes. The original team missed this. Because they only looked at surface numbers." Caspian's gaze lingered on him. Claude had not come from wealth. No prestigious alpha family. No generational fortune. He grew up above a tiny bookstore owned by his grandmother. But Claude was brilliant. He earned scholarships, graduated top of his class, built strategies that older businessmen could not even understand. That was how Caspian met him, and eventually married him. Though sometimes Claude wondered if Caspian only married him because he was useful. "You should join the board meeting tomorrow," Caspian said. Claude blinked. "The one for investors?" "Yes." "As what?" Caspian returned his attention to the papers. "An advisor. Not husband. Not partner. Just advisor." Claude smiled again. This time it hurt. "Of course." The office became quiet once more. Outside, thunder echoed through the city. Claude stared at Caspian for a long moment. He looked exhausted. The dark circles beneath his eyes had become worse. Yet Caspian continued working like a machine. "Did you eat dinner?" Claude asked softly. "No. You should eat. Later." Claude walked toward the small kitchen inside the office. He already knew there was no point arguing. So instead, he prepared food silently. Soup, warm bread, coffee without sugar. When he returned, Caspian paused. His eyes briefly moved toward the meal. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know." Claude placed it down carefully. For a moment, their fingers brushed. The alpha scent in the air shifted slightly. Warm cedar. Claude's heart clenched. Even now, Caspian affected him. It was unfair. "I'll head home first," Claude said. Caspian nodded once. "No goodbye." Claude turned toward the door. Then he stopped. "Caspian." "What?" Claude swallowed. "Do you regret marrying me?" The question lingered heavily between them. Caspian's expression did not change. Why ask something pointless? Claude felt his chest tighten. Not yes, not no, just avoidance. Again. Right? Claude whispered. And then he left. The moment the door closed, Caspian stopped reading. His hand tightened around the pen until it cracked. He stared at the empty doorway for a long time, then quietly cursed under his breath. Because the truth was simple. He had loved Claude from the beginning, and that terrified him. Chapter 2. The media loved pretending Caspian Vale was untouchable. An alpha carved from steel. They never saw the ugly parts. The reason he never let anyone close. The reason he kept Claude at arm's length. Years ago, before the empire became massive, Caspian trusted someone. His former business partner. Another alpha. A friend. The betrayal nearly destroyed everything. Money stolen. Confidential deals leaked. An attempted hostile takeover. The scandal dragged Caspian's family name through mud. His father died during the chaos. And Caspian learned a lesson. Love was weakness. Trust was dangerous. So when Claude entered his life with intelligent eyes and gentle smiles, Caspian panicked. He married Claude quickly, then built walls immediately after. Because if he let himself love openly, Claude would have the power to destroy him, and Caspian feared nothing more. Even now, especially now. The next morning, the investor meeting buzzed with powerful people. Alphas dominated most of the room. Their expensive scents mixed unpleasantly. Claude adjusted his tie calmly. Whispers followed him. That's him. The Omega? I heard Vale keeps him hidden. Probably just decorative. Claude ignored them. He had spent his entire life proving people wrong. Caspian entered minutes later. The room instantly fell silent. Black suit. Sharp gaze. Power radiating naturally from him. His eyes landed briefly on Claude. Only briefly. Then he began the meeting. 2 hours passed. Executives presented reports. Investors questioned numbers. Everything remained smooth until one older alpha investor leaned back lazily. These expansion projections seem unrealistic, the man said. Claude recognized the error immediately. The investor misunderstood international tax restructuring. Before Claude could speak, another executive laughed lightly. Well, the analysis came from an Omega advisor. A few people chuckled. Claude froze. Across the table, Caspian remained silent. Silent. Claude waited. One sentence. One defense. Anything. Nothing came. The investor smirked. Perhaps we should let experienced alphas handle the important decisions. Claude slowly closed the folder in front of him. The humiliation burned quietly. Not because strangers insulted him. He was used to that. But because Caspian said nothing. Again. Claude stood calmly. Actually, he said softly, the Singapore projections account for regional restructuring laws established last quarter. If you'd read page 23 carefully, you would know that. Silence. The investor frowned. Claude continued. Your concern about operational loss becomes irrelevant once tax deferment activates during Phase 2 acquisition. He turned another page. Which increases annual profit margins by 18%. The room stared. Claude smiled politely. Would you like me to explain the math further? The investor's face reddened. Caspian watched Claude carefully. Pride stirred in his chest. Dangerous pride. Claude sat down again. The meeting continued. But something inside him shifted permanently. That night, Claude sat alone in the massive penthouse. The city lights glowed outside. Cold. Beautiful. Lonely. Their marriage looked perfect from the outside. Luxury. Power. Status. But inside the walls of the penthouse, Claude felt invisible. He touched the bond mark near his neck. Faint. Weak. Caspian rarely strengthened it. Sometimes Claude wondered if the alpha even remembered he existed when work consumed him. The front door opened around midnight. Caspian entered. He loosened his tie while walking, then paused after noticing Claude awake. You should sleep earlier, Caspian said. Claude looked at him quietly. Why didn't you say anything? Caspian frowned slightly. About what? At the meeting. Silence. Claude laughed softly. The sound broke something in Caspian's chest. You know, Claude whispered. I kept thinking eventually you'd acknowledge me. Caspian's jaw tightened. You are overreacting. Claude stared at him in disbelief. Am I? The meeting wasn't personal. Everything is personal when it's your husband being humiliated in front of everyone. The word husband hit harder than Caspian expected, because Claude rarely used it anymore. You handled it yourself, Caspian said. That's not the point. Claude stood slowly. His scent carried sadness now. Soft rain and jasmine filled the room painfully. Do you know what hurts most? Claude asked. Caspian remained silent. I don't think you've ever truly wanted me beside you. Claude. No. Claude shook his head. I'm tired. For the first time in years, his voice sounded empty. And suddenly Caspian felt uneasy. Very uneasy. You're my spouse, Caspian said firmly. Claude smiled bitterly. Only when convenient. Then he walked away. Caspian stood frozen in the living room. For some reason, panic crept slowly into his chest. Chapter 3 days passed. Claude became quieter. Not angry. Not emotional. Just distant. And somehow that frightened Caspian more. The penthouse felt colder. Claude stopped waiting for Caspian during dinner. Stopped asking if he had eaten. Stopped sitting beside him during late nights. The warmth disappeared gradually, like sunlight fading from a room. Caspian noticed everything. He hated it, yet he did not know how to fix it, because Caspian Vale could negotiate billion-dollar deals without blinking. But one hurt Omega left him completely helpless. One evening, Caspian returned home earlier than usual. The silence felt strange. Then he noticed suitcases near the staircase. His stomach dropped instantly. Claude emerged from the guest room carrying another box. Caspian stared. What is this? Claude looked calm. Too calm. I'm leaving. The words slammed into Caspian like a physical blow. No. Claude blinked. You don't get to decide that. You're not leaving. Caspian's voice deepened instinctively. Alpha command. Usually enough to force obedience. Claude did not flinch. Instead, his eyes filled with exhaustion. Stop doing that. Caspian stepped closer. Where would you even go? Claude laughed quietly. Funny. You still think that's the problem. The Omega placed the box down. I survived long before I met you, Caspian. That was true. Claude never needed saving. He built himself from nothing. Scholarships, part-time jobs, sleepless nights. He earned every achievement himself. And Caspian knew that better than anyone. This marriage isn't healthy anymore, Claude continued softly. I love you. Caspian froze. The confession came so suddenly. So honestly. I loved you enough to wait 3 years hoping you'd finally let me in. Claude smiled sadly. But I can't keep begging for affection from my own husband. Something cracked inside Caspian. Claude walked toward him slowly. You never acknowledge me publicly. One step closer. You never defend me. Another step. You barely touch me unless you're reinforcing the bond out of obligation. Caspian could not breathe properly. And the worst part? Claude whispered. I still love you anyway. The Omega looked devastated. Completely devastated. Caspian suddenly realized something horrifying. Claude was truly done. This was not another argument. Not temporary anger. Claude had finally reached his limit. Panic exploded violently inside Caspian's chest. You're not leaving, he said again. But this time the words sounded desperate. Claude picked up the suitcase. Goodbye, Caspian. And then the impossible happened. The ruthless billionaire Alpha dropped to his knees. The suitcase slipped from Claude's hand. He stared in shock. Caspian Vale. The terrifying Alpha who made executives tremble. The man who never bowed for anyone. Was kneeling on the floor, looking completely shattered. Please, Caspian whispered. Claude's breath caught. Caspian lowered his head. Actually lowered his head. Don't leave me. The room became unbearably silent. Claude felt his heart pounding wildly. Caspian, I don't know how to do this. The Alpha's voice sounded rough, broken. I don't know how to love someone without fearing they'll destroy me. Claude froze. Years. Years of silence. And now this. Caspian finally looked up. His eyes were red. But losing you is worse. Claude had never seen him like this before. Never. The powerful Alpha looked terrified. Human. Vulnerable. I know I've hurt you, Caspian said quietly. I know I failed you. Claude felt tears forming. Then why? Caspian closed his eyes briefly. Because I loved you too much. Claude stared. That doesn't make sense. I know. Caspian laughed bitterly. Every time I wanted to hold you, I stopped myself. Every time I wanted to call you my husband publicly, I held back. I kept thinking if I gave you enough distance, maybe you couldn't destroy me if things went wrong. Claude's chest ached. So you destroyed me first instead? The question nearly killed Caspian. Because it was true. The Alpha lowered his head again. I'm sorry. Claude had imagined hearing those words countless times. But now that they finally came, they only made him sad. You hurt me so much, Caspian. I know. I felt invisible beside you. I know. I cried alone during my heats because you kept leaving for work. Caspian visibly flinched. I know. Claude wiped his eyes angrily. Then why didn't you stop? Caspian looked utterly miserable. Because I was a coward. Silence filled the penthouse. Then slowly, carefully, Caspian reached for Claude's hand. His fingers trembled. Please give me another chance, he whispered. Claude stared down at him. At the Alpha kneeling before him. At the man he still loved despite everything. And for the first time, Caspian looked truly sincere. Chapter 4. Claude did not forgive him immediately. And honestly, Caspian knew he did not deserve immediate forgiveness. The next few weeks were painfully awkward. But different. Very different. For the first time since their marriage began, Caspian actually tried. Not with money. Not with gifts. But with effort. Real effort. The first shock happened during a company gala. Hundreds of elite guests attended. Reporters. Executives. Politicians. Normally, Claude remained in the background during these events. But when they entered the ballroom together, Caspian suddenly reached for Claude's hand. The entire room fell silent. Claude nearly stopped walking. Claude nearly stopped walking. Caspian intertwined their fingers calmly, then looked directly at a nearby reporter. This is my husband, Claude Vale. Claude's heart skipped. The reporter looked stunned. Your husband? Yes, Caspian replied coldly. Is there confusion? The room exploded with whispers instantly. Claude stared at Caspian. The Alpha squeezed his hand gently. A tiny gesture. But Claude almost cried anyway. Throughout the evening, Caspian remained beside him, introducing him properly, acknowledging his intelligence, watching him with quiet attention. People noticed immediately. The terrifying Caspian Vale softened visibly whenever Claude spoke. It became impossible to ignore. Later that night, they stood alone on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below. Claude looked down at their joined hands. You surprised me tonight, he admitted. Caspian looked almost nervous. Was it bad? Claude blinked. The mighty Alpha businessman actually sounded uncertain. No, Claude whispered. It wasn't bad at all. Relief crossed Caspian's face. Then quietly, he said something that nearly stopped Claude's heart. I should have done it years ago. Claude looked away quickly, because tears threatened to appear again. Caspian noticed. His expression turned pained. I'm trying, he said softly. I know. And Claude truly did know. The Alpha was trying in every little way. Coming home earlier. Eating meals together. Texting during work. Small touches. Small conversations. Small efforts that should have existed years ago. Sometimes Claude felt angry remembering how long he had waited. Other times, he saw the genuine fear inside Caspian whenever Claude pulled away slightly. The Alpha was terrified of losing him now. Good. Maybe Caspian finally understood the pain Claude carried all this time. One rainy evening, Claude worked quietly in the home office while reviewing contracts. Caspian entered holding 2 mugs of coffee. Claude stared in shock. "You made coffee? I can perform basic human tasks," Caspian replied dryly. Claude laughed before he could stop himself. The sound made Caspian pause. God, he missed that laugh. Caspian placed the mug beside Claude, then stood there awkwardly, like he wanted to say something. Claude looked up. "What is it?" The alpha hesitated. That alone felt unbelievable. Then quietly, Caspian asked, "Can I stay here a while?" Claude's expression softened. "You live here too, you know?" "I know." But Caspian still sounded uncertain, like he feared rejection. Claude moved slightly in his chair. "Sit down then." Caspian obeyed immediately, and somehow that made Claude emotional again. The ruthless alpha who commanded entire industries now looked at Claude like his whole world depended on one answer. Maybe it did. Hours passed quietly, working, drinking coffee, occasionally discussing business. Felt peaceful, normal. Then suddenly Caspian spoke. "I used to wait outside your university library." Claude blinked. "What?" "Before we started dating." Caspian looked embarrassed for the first time ever. "You always studied until midnight." Claude stared. "You never told me that." "There are many things I never told you." Claude's chest tightened. "Why wait outside?" Caspian looked away. "Because I wanted to make sure you got home safely." Silence. Claude suddenly remembered those nights. The black car parked across the street. He always wondered. "That was you?" Caspian nodded once. Claude covered his face briefly. "You absolute idiot." Caspian actually smiled. Small, rare, beautiful. Claude stared at him helplessly, because despite everything, he still loved this man so much. Chapter 5 The real problem began 2 months later. Because healing was never simple. No matter how much Caspian changed, wounds remained. One afternoon, Claude attended a corporate luncheon alone. Caspian was overseas for meetings. Normally Claude handled himself perfectly fine. But one rival executive crossed a line. "You trapped Caspian Vale nicely," the alpha sneered. Claude looked up calmly. "Excuse me? An Omega from nowhere marrying into billions? Impressive strategy." Claude's expression cooled. He had heard similar insults before, but this time something felt different, because now he knew exactly how much those words used to affect him, and how alone he once felt hearing them. The alpha continued carelessly. "Honestly, everyone assumed Caspian would eventually replace you with a proper partner." Claude stood slowly. "Be careful," he said softly. "Or what?" Claude smiled politely. "Or you'll embarrass yourself publicly." Unfortunately for the executive, Claude had already researched his company's financial issues weeks earlier. Within 5 minutes, the alpha walked away pale and humiliated. Normally Claude would feel satisfied. Instead, he just felt tired. That night, Caspian returned unexpectedly early from his flight. The moment he entered the penthouse, he noticed Claude sitting quietly near the window. Something felt wrong instantly. Alpha instincts sharpened. "What happened?" Claude looked surprised. "Nothing." "Claude." The Omega sighed. "Someone made comments today." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Who?" Claude hesitated. Caspian's eyes darkened dangerously. "Who?" Claude finally explained. By the end, Caspian looked murderous. Actually murderous. Claude almost pitied the executive. Almost. "Caspian. He said that to you publicly?" "It's fine." "No." Caspian's voice turned terrifyingly calm. "It isn't." Claude suddenly realized something strange. Caspian looked angrier about the insult than Claude himself. The alpha immediately grabbed his phone. "What are you doing?" "Ending his career." Claude blinked. "You can't destroy someone because they insulted me." Caspian stared at him coldly. "Watch me." Claude stood quickly. "Caspian." The alpha's scent flooded the room sharply. Possessive. Furious. "For years," Caspian said quietly, "people insulted you because of me." Claude froze. I stayed silent while they disrespected the person I loved most. Caspian's jaw tightened. I won't allow it anymore. The sincerity in his voice stunned Claude completely. Caspian stepped closer. You are my husband, he said firmly. No one gets to humiliate you. Claude felt his throat tighten painfully, because this was all he ever wanted. Acknowledgement, protection, love spoken openly. Caspian gently touched Claude's face. I'm sorry it took me so long to become worthy of you. Claude broke. Tears finally spilled down his cheeks. And immediately Caspian looked panicked. Did I upset you? Claude laughed through tears. You're unbelievable. Caspian carefully wiped his tears away. Like Claude was precious, fragile, beloved. The Omega leaned into the touch unconsciously. Then Caspian whispered something so soft Claude almost missed it. I love you. Everything stopped. Claude stared at him. Caspian looked terrified after saying it. Like the confession physically hurt. Say that again, Claude whispered. The Alpha swallowed. Then repeated quietly, I love you. Claude kissed him before Caspian could say anything else. Soft, desperate, emotional. Caspian froze briefly. Then his hands wrapped around Claude instantly, like he never wanted to let go again. Chapter 6. The media nearly lost their minds. Because suddenly, Caspian Vale became openly obsessed with his husband. The transformation shocked everyone. Reporters captured photos constantly. Caspian holding Claude's hand. Caspian adjusting Claude's scarf. Caspian glaring murderously whenever someone stood too close. One article literally called it, The Fall of the Ruthless Alpha. Claude laughed for 10 straight minutes reading that headline. Caspian looked offended. I'm still ruthless. Sure you are, Claude teased. The Alpha narrowed his eyes, then pulled Claude directly into his lap while they sat in the penthouse living room. Claude yelped, Caspian. What? You're ridiculous now. You preferred when I ignored you? Claude immediately wrapped his arms around Caspian's neck. Never mind. Continue. A rare laugh escaped Caspian. Deep, warm. Claude still felt shocked whenever he heard it, because the cold Alpha from before seemed like another person entirely. Not gone, just softer with Claude. Only Claude. Sometimes Caspian still struggled emotionally. Years of isolation could not disappear overnight. But now he communicated. He tried. That changed everything. One evening, Claude found Caspian sitting alone in the dark office. The Alpha looked tense. Exhausted, Claude approached quietly. Bad day, Caspian sighed. The merger failed. Claude hummed softly. Then, without hesitation, he climbed directly into Caspian's lap. The Alpha blinked. Claude, you looked like you needed this. Caspian wrapped his arms around him immediately, face pressing against Claude's neck. Breathing deeply, Claude smiled faintly. People always assumed Alphas were strong all the time. But Caspian carried unimaginable pressure daily. And now Claude finally understood something. The Alpha was never withholding affection because he felt nothing. He withheld it because he feared needing someone too much. Unfortunately for him, it was too late. Caspian already needed Claude desperately. I nearly lost you, Caspian murmured quietly. Claude stroked his hair gently. But you didn't. I almost did. The fear in his voice remained real. Claude pulled back slightly. Then don't waste this chance. Caspian looked at him carefully. I won't. And for once, Claude believed him completely. Chapter 7. Winter arrived quietly. The penthouse no longer felt cold. Now it smelled like coffee, warm blankets, and the soft mix of their scents intertwined together. Home. For the first time, it truly felt like home. Claude sat curled on the couch reading financial reports while Caspian worked nearby. Occasionally, the Alpha glanced over simply to make sure Claude remained there. It was strangely adorable. If you keep staring at me like that, I'll start charging money, Claude said without looking up. Caspian remained completely serious. I'd pay it. Claude snorted loudly. That's not romantic. That's concerning billionaire behavior. A faint smile tugged at Caspian's lips. Then his phone rang. His expression darkened after checking the caller. What happened? Claude asked. My mother wants dinner tomorrow. Claude blinked. That explained the expression. Caspian's family never approved of their marriage. Especially his mother, a powerful alpha woman obsessed with status. She believed Claude was beneath their family. At the beginning of the marriage, Caspian never defended Claude from her comments either. Another painful memory. Caspian noticed Claude becoming quiet. Immediately, guilt crossed his face. You don't have to come, he said softly. Claude looked surprised. Really? Yes. A year ago, Caspian would have demanded his attendance for appearances. Now he looked genuinely concerned about Claude's comfort. Claude set the papers aside. No, I'll go. Caspian frowned. Claude, it's fine. Claude smiled slightly. Besides, I want to see something. What? Claude leaned forward. Whether you'll defend me this time. Caspian went very still. Then slowly he took Claude's hand. I will. The dinner felt tense immediately. Caspian's mother greeted Claude politely enough, but her eyes remained cold. You've gained attention recently, she commented while seated at the massive dining table. Claude smiled lightly. Apparently marrying your son became media entertainment. She ignored the joke. I still believe this marriage damages the Vale image. Silence. Claude calmly reached for his wine. Years ago, comments like this crushed him. Now, not as much, because this time he wasn't alone. Caspian placed his glass down sharply. Enough. His mother looked startled. Excuse me? You will speak respectfully to my husband. The entire table froze. Claude stared. Caspian continued coldly. Claude has accomplished more through intelligence and hard work than most people born into wealth, including members of this family. His mother looked furious. Caspian. No. His voice remained calm but dangerous. I spent years allowing disrespect toward him. That ends now. Claude felt emotional instantly. Again. Damn this alpha. Caspian reached for Claude's hand beneath the table. Steady. Protective. Certain. And suddenly Claude realized something beautiful. Caspian no longer feared loving him openly. Not anymore. Chapter 8 months later. Claude stood in front of the enormous windows inside Caspian's office. The same office where everything once felt painfully distant. Now things were different. Warmer. Alive. Caspian approached from behind and wrapped his arms around Claude's waist naturally. Thinking about something? He asked. Claude leaned back against him. Us. The alpha tightened his hold slightly. Good thoughts or bad thoughts? Claude smiled softly. Both. Silence settled comfortably. Epilogue 1 year later. The annual Vale Industries Gala overflowed with powerful guests. Reporters crowded everywhere. Camera flashes lit the ballroom endlessly. At the center of attention stood Caspian Vale. Cold suit. Sharp features. Still terrifying. Still powerful. But now there was warmth in his eyes whenever he looked toward the entrance. Because Claude had just arrived. The Omega wore a dark blue suit that made half the room stare openly. Caspian immediately crossed the ballroom toward him. Ignoring investors. Ignoring reporters. Ignoring everyone. Claude raised an eyebrow teasingly. You look intense. You were gone for 20 minutes. I was talking to someone. Caspian narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Claude laughed. The alpha wrapped an arm around his waist possessively. A nearby reporter quickly approached. Mr. Vale, one photo, please? Caspian glanced toward Claude first. Claude rolled his eyes fondly. Go ahead. The photographer smiled. Can you stand closer together? Before Claude could respond, Caspian pulled him directly against his side. Flash. Another flash. Then the reporter asked jokingly, Mr. Vale, people online say your husband completely changed you. Any comment? The ballroom quieted slightly. Everyone watched. Caspian looked toward Claude. His expression softened instantly. Then calmly, the ruthless billionaire alpha answered. He saved me from becoming a man incapable of love. Claude froze. The room collectively lost its mind. But Caspian only cared about one person. Always one person. Claude smiled slowly, warmly, beautifully, and this time, Caspian did not hide how deeply in love he was. Not anymore. Never again. The end.